So again, as we get started today, one thing I wanted to show you, and you probably have seen this already, I sort of went over it with you, but I want to show it to you. This is the homework that you have for chapters 13 and 14. And it says the lab for chapters 13 and 14, so it gets the lab, not the homework, is to build and deploy the first version of your web portfolio. And it's, again, it's meant to be a first cut. So it's not the way that it'll end up, and ideally it'll get better and better as time goes on, etc. It should be built utilizing Bootstrap. Utilizing templates are optional. We'll talk about what those mean. It should include the following pages or sections. So there should be an About Me page, a resume page, a contact page, a coursework page, and a portfolio page. If you count that up, that's 5 pages. That's a minimum. I mean, if you wanted to, for some reason, have more than that, you could. Okay? Pages must be full of meaningful content. So this is the kind of thing that you could put out and show a potential employer. So in other words, you wouldn't want to fill that up with lip-some text. It wouldn't really make any sense to do that, okay? All right. You should have an image of yourself. And again, I'm not trying to be funny when I say this, but for that image, don't have it be one with your mask on. All right, I realize that's the way things are today, at least hopefully for a little while. But, you want a prospective employer to be able to see what you look like. All right. Now it says there a working contact form that sends an email to you. That's up to you. We're going to look at different things about that. And then launching your web portfolio, we're going to do this by the end of the week on iwt.rankins.edu/yourname. What I have to do, and right now the only one that I've created is Angie's, but I will create for each one of you an account on the Rankins server. It's not very hard for you to use, and I'll show you what you have to do in order to put your stuff out there. Literally, it'll take about a half an hour. It's not like this is going to take a long time. All right. I do want to mention to you that this morning I sent you an email, and it says Bootstrap 4 slides. These are some slides that were made by Mr. Smith. We are going to go over them. But that said, we could spend the whole period just sitting there and saying, okay, this is this. It's easier to show you things than it is to describe them. So if you bear with me for about probably most of the period today, we'll talk. And then after that, we're just going to do and do and do. All right? So I'm going to bring his stuff up here. And I've got it here, and unfortunately, you can see that I got a mess here. That's not it. So you've got this same thing. So I'm just going to be going through some of these slides that, like I said, you were sent this morning. All right. And you're going to probably be surprised because, oh, there's 6 sets of slides. Yeah, we'll spend some time on this one. The other ones we're going to go through like this. Because, again, in my opinion, for whatever that's worth, you're going to learn a lot more by doing than you are by just sitting there and looking at it. Oops, it's not what we want. Try that again. Here. All right, so that's the way you've got it set up. Now, Bootstrap, we mentioned this before, was originally called Twitter Bootstrap. It was created by 2 gentlemen who worked at Twitter. To my knowledge, they don't even work there anymore. I think they're just totally Bootstrap people now. All right, Bootstrap developers, whatever you want to call them. Bootstrap 2, the version we're going to learn or use is version 4. I think it's 4.5. It's whatever the latest and greatest is. Version 5 is, depending on who you listen to, is either in alpha or in beta mode, which means they've got a new version that's going to be coming out, but it's not ready yet. All right? They're very deliberate when they come out with new versions, typically because they're not very backward compatible. So, for instance, if you went from Windows 7 to Windows 10, it probably wasn't a quantum leap. Stuff still worked pretty much the same, etc. But in Bootstrap, when you went from 3 to 4, for example, it was a really big change. And most of the stuff that you had in 3 had to be rewritten for 4. That's just the way that they've set it up, whether that's right or wrong. All right, so again, this was the history, and that's fine. You can read that yourselves if you have an interest. It's about 10 years old. Here's the key benefits. And the number one benefit is the middle one. It's mobile first. It's responsive. Now, these slides were changed a little bit by Evan because what Paul had there was themes and Evan added templates. And yeah, there are templates. We're going to look at some of that stuff in just a little bit. All right. We've talked about CDNs before, and we're going to look at, even though we have already, but we're going to look at it in a little bit more depth and breadth of coverage today. I'm going to recommend that whenever you start something new in Bootstrap, you start with the Bootstrap starter file. Now, that said, remember, if you use a CDN like this, what this means is that you are referencing a URL on the internet. So what you're saying is, I don't want to download Bootstrap, I don't want to download jQuery, I don't want to, etc. I don't want to download that stuff. I want to point to them out on the internet and have them brought into my program on an as-needed basis. All right? Which is, the way most people do it. Now, but that said, you may have problems then if you are ever, let's just say, and it's probably happened to you, I know it has to me, that you're in your car, not driving, but you're in your car and you pull out your phone and you really don't have internet. All right. Well, then that might not work when you're in your car, for example, or if you're someplace in some remote location where you don't have an internet connection or an unbelievably slow internet connection that seems like you don't have one. When you set up Bootstrap, then I'm going to recommend, as I already said, that we use the CDN. If you don't want to do that, there's different ways, there's different downloads that you can do. You can literally download the bootstrap.min.css, the bootstrap.min.js, etc. You can download all that stuff. The recommendation is, if you download that, don't change the original. In other words, make your own JavaScript file and overwrite stuff that's in bootstrap.min.js. Make your own CSS file and overwrite what's in bootstrap.min.css. But don't change that stuff. Some people still do anyway. All right? Now, there are a bunch of different themes that are available to you. Some of the themes are free. Some of the themes can be really, really expensive. There are people who have either made a career, or maybe not a full career, but at least a partial career, by creating their own Bootstrap themes and then putting them online and selling them. All right. There's a place, as you can see right there, it's called Bootswatch. Okay, and they've got probably somewhere around 10 to 15, maybe even 20, I don't know how many, I haven't been out there in a while, that are pre-made templates. All right, and you can download those templates. They will have a color scheme, etc. You can still go in and change that stuff if you want to, but it's got a common look and feel. The problem, as I see it, or the only problem with going out to Bootswatch is, after a while, again, that's what a lot of people are doing. So what happens is your template looks a lot like everybody else's. And that's just the way that it is. If you're okay with that, you can do that. All right. So it says you don't need to include a separate CSS reset or a normalized CSS file with Bootstrap that's already built in. All right. So this is the CDN. Again, I'm not going to sit there and go over any of it with you. All right. The key takeaway from this, and we're going to look at it in a minute, is there's a bootstrap.min.css that goes up in your head section, and there's a bootstrap.min.js that most people put right before your body tag, your ending body tag. All right, in the body section. All right, so there it is. Okay. Now, we started talking about this, but not much. So let's look at it right now. If you count along the side here, you see extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large. That means 5. All right. What I'm talking about, though, is what they're saying here is typically extra small is 0 through 575. All right, that's considered extra small. 576 to 767 is small. 768 to 991 is medium. You get the idea. These are what are referred to as, for lack of better words, kind of the natural Bootstrap breakpoints. All right. So when you hit a certain size, you can see this, and I've shown this to you already, as you take your browser window and you collapse it down. You can see it, and I've shown you this already. If you hit F12 to go into your Chrome Developer Tools and you click that second button that's down there, all right, on your toolbar that's inside Developer Tools, it'll show you how it'll look in different media. All right, so it'll show you how it'll look in an iPhone 10, on an iPad, etc. When you do this, just so you know, there's different ways of doing it. What we're going to get to in just a minute is one thing about Bootstrap is it's columnar. I think we mentioned this last week, but I'm saying it again. When you put in a row of text, it's 12 columns. You can take those 12 columns and apportion them any way you'd like to. So you can have one thing that's 12 columns wide. You can have 12 things that are each one column wide. All right? Or anything like kind of in between. Bootstrap is naturally responsive. What you're going to find out when you want to set padding, and they show a little bit of it here, but it's not shown really well. But let's say that I wanted margin right 25 pixels. Now you just say MR for margin right, dash, and you give it a value. All right, so it's done a little bit differently. You can still, in your code, in your CSS file, you're still going to write CSS the way we write it. But sometimes you want to go in and actually, what Bootstrap is more than anything else, it's tons of classes that people have already created. So sometimes you can go and you can take something and say, well, I don't even have to write my own. I can just add this class. And that's a lot of times that's what you do. Right? And this is what I just mentioned. So there's margin padding, but there's margin padding left, right, top, bottom, etc. All right. Notice there's centering. Okay. MX-auto, as it says. It includes that class for horizontally centering fixed width block level content. So if you had a button and you wanted to make sure that button was exactly in the middle, on the middle of the screen, you could do that, for example. All right. I'm going to start showing you this in a couple weeks for the how wide is your viewport. When we go in and start looking at JavaScript, you're going to learn how to write some very simple JavaScript so that any time, I put this in a lot of my programs, I stick an alert in there, and I've got a little button on the bottom, and anytime I click the button, it shows an alert, which is just a little box that comes up on top, and that alert has the width and the height of the current browser window. All right, you never have to use it. You never have to put it in, but I put it in because a lot of times as I'm moving stuff around, I want to know exactly what my current width and height are. All right, so we'll talk about, as it says, about fluid layouts. Okay, there's a width property, as you can see. All right, there's a, notice, minimum view height width, minimum view width, I should say, minimum view height. All right, colors, this is one thing. These are typically the colors that are used in here. Notice primary is kind of a royal blue or whatever you'd call it. Secondary is a darker gray. Success is a green. Danger is a red. Warning is kind of, it really comes out more orange typically. Info is a medium blue. There's text light, there's text dark, there's text muted. And you can put your own color after that. So if I wanted purple, you could put text-purple if you want to do that. All right. But these are the colors that are pretty standard to Bootstrap. And they really do signify a meaning. All right. For instance, danger typically says that. Maybe that's something that you want to avoid, or it's something that you should be concerned with, take notice of, etc. You can set it up for background colors. You can set buttons of that color. You can set text of that color. You can basically use it for just about anything. All right. Same thing with borders. You can give them the same colors. And what they don't really show right here too is, a lot of times what you'll do is you'll set what are called outlines. on your, like your buttons. And let's say that you had this one, okay? It may show, you know, whatever color you want in here, but when you put your mouse over it, then it turns the color of the outline. All right, that's referred to as the outline button. You're going to see that pretty quick. All right, a lot of stuff for text. Notice text left, text center, text right, etc. Which, and they're showing kind of here what it corresponds to. Text align left, text align center, text align right. The transform, if you've never seen this before, sometimes if you go out to a website, what you'll notice is that they have some text near, typically near the top of the screen. Maybe the first paragraph, the first sentence might be capitalized. Every word in there might be capitalized. All right, you probably have seen so many of them, you don't even realize it anymore, but a lot of sites do that. And that's with a text transform. So you can force something into being uppercase, force it into being lowercase, or you can use capitalize, which says it'll take every word and it'll capitalize the first letter. I think it even takes common words like and the and capitalizes those. All right, you can work with font weight. You can work with italic. There's nothing new here. All right. Really, this was set up to work with Flexbox. All right, which is one of the reasons that we've already gone over Flexbox. All right, and a lot of the things that you learn for Flexbox, such as they mentioned right here, display, and there'll be other ones too. All right, but you'll notice when you look at this, again, as it says, use the following classes. So the class is D-none. So you don't have to type display : none. It's just D-none. And most of these were designed to be semantic and to be less typing than what you had to do previously. All right. So as it says, you can use that with breakpoints. We've already talked about what those breakpoints were. You can work with direction. Again, I don't want to sit there and just read to you. This is all stuff that we've looked at before. Justifying content, aligning items, aligning a single item with align self. This is all stuff you've worked with. Flex grow, flex shrink, flex order, wrap, aligning content. All right. So like I said, there's nothing, much of that stuff that was in there is nothing new. It's just a different way of looking at it. And that's what we're going to do in just a minute, is we're going to start taking a look at some of that stuff. All right. I've already mentioned, and you're going to notice there's only 9 slides here. Most of the rest of them are 10 slides or so. All right, so we're going to bam, bam, bam through this. But as you notice when you look in here, and I mentioned this to you before, Bootstrap is based on a grid system. All right. What you'll end up doing typically at the top of your body section, okay, is you'll have a div of an ID equal container, and you'll throw almost everything on the page will go in there. All right. Container's got a special meaning to Bootstrap. Okay, it really allows you to take advantage of the grid system. As it says, they're used to contain, pad, and center stuff within. They should never be nested, so you shouldn't have a container within a container. All right? Okay. It says it comes with 3 different containers. Now notice the difference between these. You've got container, which sets a max width, container fluid, where the width is 100%. It literally stretches across the entire screen if that's what you want to do. Sometimes it's kind of nice to have a little bit of padding by default on the left and the right hand side. Then you wouldn't use container fluid. You just use container. All right. And as it says, there's a container breakpoint that you can go in there and you can set that. This will all start hopefully making more sense when we start going through it. The grid system I've already mentioned to you, and these are just some examples right here. But when you think about it, I mean, you could do a 1, then a 3, then a 2, then a 4, etc. All right, you can break them up into as many, different columns in a single row, or as few as you want to. Not only that, we could break it up like this, like the example that you see right here, with 6 and 6. If you decided for whatever reason to not put anything in the stuff on the left-hand side, And just on the right, it would be right justified, but only take up half the screen. All right, so you can set this up, like I said, any way that you want to set it up. So here is an example, and as it says right there, you can see that column 2 is twice as wide as column 1 is. All right, based on the numbering that's done here. Also notice that what you have is you've got a container. Then typically what you do is you define each row that you want in there. Now, if the rows are going to be the same, boom, 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 you don't have to do it every time. But you typically set up each row. Why? Because then you can put in that row how many columns, that you're going to use. You're going to use 12 whether you want to or not, basically. Let's say that I did this, and if you look at the example here, let's just say that I did 4 and 9. Are you with me? I did 4 and 9. What would happen is the 4 would go on the first part, there'd be nothing in the second part, and the 9 would go down to the next one because it can only hold 12. And if I put 13 in there, it isn't able to fit 13. All right. Breakpoints, again, we've talked about already. Here's a more, these are responsive by default. So what this says is, okay, I want 4 columns like this. But when you squish it up so much that it's the size of a cell phone, it's going to automatically stack them. All right? Which is typically what you'd want to have happen anyway. All right? Like I said, he's got a couple different examples in here. You'll notice here we've got XL2. That means on one of those extra large devices, so something that's 1200 pixels or above, you'd want these each to be 2 columns. All right? Or you'd want it, each to be a size of 2. So it'd be like this for an extra large. Once you start shrinking it down, so you get down from extra large to large, it's automatically going to resize. Now, if you set something instead of XL for this, if you set it to XS, then what you're saying is I want that formatting to be for any size there is. Now, you wouldn't typically do that because typically something's going to look a lot different on a phone than it's going to look on an extra large device. As it says, there's more examples. We're going to look at some of that in just a minute. Now, one thing that's new in Bootstrap 4 are these things that you see right here that are known as cards. All right. It used to be that instead of cards, they had something called wells, and there were other things that you could use as well. A card is sort of, not exactly, but sort of synonymous with an index card. All right. So when you look at it, it says, what is it? You can use it to hold anything. By default, it typically will have an image. It'll have a heading underneath it, and it'll have some text underneath that heading. You can, if you want to, you can put them in like that. You can leave out the image. You can leave out the heading. You can leave out the text. You wouldn't leave out all 3 because it's, what are you using it for then? But you can leave out any of them that you want to leave out or need to leave out. All right, as it says, it's a flexible and extensible container. That's the thing about this, is it's doing its best to be extensible. So it's going to accommodate any screen size. That's what they're talking about with it being extensible. All right. So as it says, there's a basic card, and you see, well, it doesn't have the stuff you said in it. Yeah, because what did they put in it? They just said card. They put a body in with just some lipsum. That's it. All right. But you can add titles, and as mentioned, and you can, again, you can format these any way you want, and you can add an image in there. You can add, it's up to you. You can make it look whatever way you want it to look. All right. All right. So there's with a header and a footer as an example. All right. There's with a button. So you can stagger them. Notice you can align them any way you want to. I would say that would look pretty ugly on a web page. Maybe you don't agree with that. You can use all those colors that we talked about previously. As already mentioned, this is quite often the way that you see this set up. All right. So this is kind of what I envision. If you don't agree, don't do it. But one of the things I envision is when at least on the first cut possibly of your portfolio, that what you might do is let's just assume that you've got 6 different websites you've created in here that you think you can use, in your portfolio. Over time, that's probably going to change. Your stuff will get more sophisticated, etc. But what I might do right here is I might go out to that website, take a screenshot by hitting my print screen key, and then put that image in here. Then right here, I would either take and save that thing. Probably what I would do is right here, this would be my link right there to my GitHub for that. And then down here would be a little explanation and possibly even another hyperlink if I put it out on GitHub pages. Now, I'm not saying you have to do it like that, but what you want to do is if you're to the point where you're sending out things for a prospective employer to look at, you want to make it as simple for them to be able to see what they want to see as possible. All right? You shouldn't make them ever work for anything, because otherwise, they can just look at somebody else's. This is too hard. Boom. All right? My mother, for about 15 years, she had a job as an administrative assistant. She has a very unique capability. She could take a resume like this and literally go like this. And she could tell you any spelling errors or any grammatical errors that were in there. She did it that fast because I watched her do it. And her job was she worked for an advertising agency. They literally sometimes got hundreds of applications a day. And she was told that anybody where she found a spelling mistake or a grammatical error to just throw it out. So she had a pile there, and those people immediately got a rejection letter. All right. And as you'd guess, not only can you put the image on the top, you can put it on the bottom. So if you think that would look better, you can left justify it, you can right justify it, you can center justify it. All right. And again, there's more examples out there as well. The nav bar we've already looked at, but let's, again, just 8 slides. Now, as it says, it includes support for branding. So typically, what you're going to do in a nav bar, and you'll see one in just a moment, is on the upper left-hand corner, if you've got your own logo, literally, you could make your own logo. There's free logo makers out there, all right? Or let's just say, like with me, let's just say that, I like my initials, so I put JPS there. But the point is, by default, when you make a nav bar, way in the left-hand corner, it says nav bar. You don't want to leave that in your nav bar. All right, that's where your brand goes. All right. I mean, even if you put in there Jeff Scott portfolio, that's better than having it say nav bar. All right. And then a lot of times what people do is they position all of their options, about me, resume, portfolio, etc. They move that to the right. Do you have to do that? Of course not. You can make it left, you can make it center, however you want to set it up. All right. As it says, by default, they're responsive. They're fluid by default, so they'll take up as much of the page as you have set up. So if you've got 100% of the page, your nav bar is going to be 100%. And we've already looked a little bit at this with some of these nav bars. All right. But as it says right there, don't do it from scratch. You're typically better off to go out and find one that you like under getbootstrap.com, pull it in, and start modifying it. All right. I mean, you can make one from scratch, all right, but typically it's a waste of time to do that. All right. Notice here, too, a couple things. You'll notice that this says right here, up above, it says navbar dark, BG dark. All right. That means I want basically this to have a dark background, and I want it to be dark. So by default, the text will change to white. As you'd probably guess, the opposite of that would be light. So you can, if you want to, put in navbar light, BG light. You can put in the same thing. Then this becomes light, the text becomes black. But you can always modify that text. So if you didn't like white text here, you wanted a different color, all right, you could put that in there. All right, and when you start looking, you'll notice in here, What does it have? Well, the first thing it has here is item active, and that is for what? That is for the index. Kind of nice to do that so they know what page they're on. All right. And then the other ones, if we look, they don't show all of them, but they just show the next one. Nav item, nav link, href, so that would go to a projects page. So the expectation will be that when you create yours, it'll look something like this. Again, it's automatically responsive. Okay? When it gets small enough, you get this hamburger menu that's down here. So rather than showing this, it'll just show this. When you click it, it'll literally show like an expanded menu that'll go down vertically, and it'll have home on one line, projects on one line, about on one line, and contact on one line. All right, we already talked about adding the brand. All right, sometimes people do that, and again, they do something with their initials or whatever. They're telling you you can put a logo in there as well. Color scheme I already mentioned, so there's the difference between them. You can even use those colors that we talked about before. Right? Be real leery of putting too many colors on a page, because you might think, well, that's really bright, that looks really cool. Not everybody agrees with that. All right. A lot of times when you create something like this, it's good to take somebody, if you got a family member, especially if they're not necessarily a computer person, just have them look at it and tell you what they think. All right. It's funny because I used to say that too. It's like when people create their resume. You shouldn't have somebody like, typically, I remember doing this because I told you what my mom did for a living, but I remember having her look at my resume. Oh, this looks so good, Jeff. No, she's biased. I'd rather have somebody who didn't like me look at it than her. Not to criticize her, but somebody who didn't like me, or somebody who was a colleague and maybe not necessarily a great friend, would look at it and be a lot more critical of it. That's what you're going to want. Again, there's additional examples out there. The Jumbotron, we've looked a little bit at that, but we're going to, again, 10 slides here, so bear with me just for a couple minutes. So this is what you get by default. All right. As it says, it's a lightweight, flexible component to showcase key marketing messages in your site. Now, this is me speaking, so what I'm about to say you might totally disagree with. That's fine. I wouldn't have my background gray when my Jumbotron is gray, but that's just me. I would change the color of one, or I would change the color of the other one. There's nothing wrong with what they did. They put a white border around it so you can see that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. All right? But these are the kind of things that basically you should be thinking of. As it says, it originated with newspapers. I think we've talked about this before. And if you remember, they still have them. There are still boxes where you can buy a newspaper. The newspaper's folded in half. And the half that you see inside the box, that's above the fold. That's why, again, Jumbotrons go above the fold. They make a lot of sense for some websites. They don't for others. You might create yours, for what you're doing for your portfolio and say, I have absolutely no use for a Jumbotron. And that's fine. Or you might say the opposite, and that's fine too. Again, the idea here, what we want is, I want 8 of these that look really different from one another. And I don't mean just the color. I mean the content, etc., the setup should look different. It should be reflective of you. All right? All right. And they talk about it, using the fold, etc. Okay? What do you want to do? Get your users' attention. Pique their interest. Build a relationship. Give them an action to take. Okay? So you just want to make sure that when they're there on a web page, they know exactly what they should be doing. All right? Now, it's funny because next week, I think I've told you about this already, but I'm going to say it again in case I have not. And I don't think we'll do it until next week, but probably on Monday of next week. A couple of weeks ago, I met with this woman from I always forget the name. I think it's Rescue Bridge, this animal rescue place that she has. And I'm going to show you because I recorded the, we had a Zoom meeting, and I recorded the Zoom meeting. It's 24 minutes long, all right? And you can listen to her, you can listen to me. And what I'll have by then, too, is she's given me some requirements, some stuff that she's interested in. And what I'm going to ask that you guys do is each one of you in here, I'm going to send you all the stuff she sent me, is you try to create a site for her. Now, it's not going to be finished. You might go, well, this won't look very good. Well, make it look as good as you can make it look. She's given me some colors that she's interested in having. I asked her to go out to Google Fonts, and she said her head was spinning. She said, I will basically trust your students that, you know, if they've got a font and they put it in there and I don't like it, I'll let them know, type of an idea. All right. Okay. Again, there's the difference. So notice div class equal container. You can see there's a little bit. And here, fluid takes up the entire thing. All right. You can put images in there. You can put anything into a Jumbotron that you want. Or, as mentioned, you can just not have one. Finally, with buttons, and this won't take long either because not only is it 8 slides, but we've hit on most of the high points in here. All right. As it says, you can use buttons for just about everything. All right. You can take a hyperlink and basically tell Bootstrap it's a button. So you can take this and make it look just like this. And there's almost nothing you have to do in order to do that. All right. You can add any of those colors to the buttons, to the background, to the text color, etc., or your own. One thing that's probably a pretty good idea is when you go through now, you might decide that on your portfolio you want maybe 2 or 3 different color buttons for different things. All right. But a lot of times if you go out to a site that you can kind of think that's probably was made by Bootstrap, they don't have all 7 or 8 of those colors in there. It just can be too much and people don't know, you know, geez, what does that green button mean, etc. type of an idea. All right, so again, here are the links. You can see colors. There's the outlines that I mentioned before. All right. Notice that you can set 3 button sizes. Now, one thing about this, just so you know, is typically when you create a button, it conforms to the text that's in the button. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if I put in a button, this is my button, it's the best thing ever, it's going to be a big button. Even if you make it small size, it's still going to be pretty wide. All right. And again, there's more examples. So that said, like I said, I don't want to waste your time, but I'd like everybody in here to please do this. If you decide that what I'm giving you in here, let's just say that you think, yeah, it was okay, but I wish I would have had a little bit more, for example. Evan is doing, you know, he did an hour-long video on this, and he had a thing that one of his, this is a second-year student did. They created a site for this Taqueria Olvera, and Evan actually helped them put it out there. It's an actual working site, from what he said. I don't know. I only watched the first 10 minutes of this presentation. But if you go out there and you look, notice it's Bootstrap lecture number 1. All right. So if you think you want more than what you're getting from me, I'm not offended. All right. Everybody's different, you know, when you go in there and you start looking at that stuff. I didn't send this to you, but I've got, you know, as you probably guessed, W3 Schools has got a Bootstrap 4 tutorial. You know, they got tutorials for virtually everything that's IT. And I've got this for you. I'm going to send it, but I just didn't yet. So that's the W3 Schools. Free Code Camp has got a 10-part free course online if you want to learn Bootstrap. This thing is kind of cool. I found this over the weekend. It's called Bootstrap 4 Tutorial, Best and Free Guide of Responsive Web Design. And underneath it, they've got examples of 4 different pages, and they give you all the code. There's one of them is a portfolio. Now, it may not look at all like you want yours to look, but sometimes it's good to look at stuff like that just for ideas. All right. And I've got that. I've got, I think, yeah, there's the rest. So that was Evan's stuff. He's done 2 lectures that I found. I watched this one right here. This was about 30 minutes. And he went over a lot of the stuff that I just went over. All right. But I figured, to me at least, it would make more sense for us to sit and we're going to build a first blush, first pass, so to speak, of your portfolio. Now, when we get done with this, if you look at it and you go, this is nothing like I want, then don't use it. But I just am showing you an example of what can be done. That's all. That's all it's meant to be. All right. What you're going to find, I believe, if you go through Evan's stuff is, and I was going to do this, but I thought, you know, I just didn't know if you wanted all that stuff. So I'm going to go here first to documentation. I'm under getbootstrap.com. You'll notice if you look up here, see this down arrow? So if you wanted to go back to version 3 or version 2, which is really pretty old, you could do that. And it'll show you all the versions that are in there. So you can see right now 4.5.x is the newest version. It's the newest published version. Like we said, they're working on 5 right now. Okay, you can go out and do this yourselves, but you can Google, go out to YouTube and Google Bootstrap 5, and they'll tell you all the new features that are going to be in there. All right, if Bootstrap 5, boom, if that's the one that was out there, we'd be learning Bootstrap 5 right now. All right. So when you look on here, and again, I know you've seen some of this stuff already. Notice there's a Get Started and there's a Download. Now we've clicked on the Get Started already, but let's look on the Download. If you do this, if you choose the one that's right here, you're going to get 2 or 3 folders, probably a folder with about 2 or 3 other folders in it. And what will be in there, amongst other things, are bootstrap.min.js and bootstrap.min.css. So if you want to download those from there, you can. This is one way that you can do it. All right. You can download source files. You can, this is what we're going to look at in just a minute. We're going to look at some of the examples. I've already mentioned using the CDN to you. All right. And they show it right here. There are package managers. Believe it or not, you've already used a package manager. If you followed along and you did the GitHub Pages thing that I showed you, we used NPM. NPM is the Node package manager. So you've already used that. There are other ones like Gulp, Yarn, Ruby Gems, Composer, NuGet. NuGet is, I think at least, it's more or less, it's a Microsoft thing if you're working with .NET. All right. So, like I said, if you wanted to get it from there, if you didn't want to use the CDNs. All right. So we've looked at this a little bit, but this is, if you start going down here, I'm not going to run through all this, but if you look on here, there's a bunch of stuff. For instance, if I look here and it's got theming, they'll start talking about where different things that you can use in here. All right. I thought there might even have some different themes like Bootswatch and stuff. I don't know if they do or not. JavaScript, they will tell in here how Bootstrap works with JavaScript. All right. The one that you're going to come in here and you're probably going to use 90% of the time is you're going to come down here to components. You can go to layout if you want to know more about basically the 12 column type of layout and different types of layouts and breakpoints, etc. All right. But you can go to utilities and find out some more about this stuff. But components has got virtually in here when you start going through it, and I'm not going to. All right. But when you start going through it, it's got the different stuff that you can use. So again, for instance, let's say that I started to create this, and I know I want to set up breadcrumbs. All right. So I can click on breadcrumb, and it'll show me examples. You're always best off looking first at the documentation and using their stuff. It's been tested. You can always go back and modify it. All right. I don't mean to say, don't ever write your own stuff. Sometimes you're going to have to write your own stuff. All right. The other thing too is if you go into here under examples, all right? So these are all examples right here, different stuff that you can use. And I don't know how many there are, but there's got to be somewhere between 10 and 20. So let's assume for a second that I wanted to set up a checkout page. All right. Well, I could come here, and I don't have to use this one, but this sure provides a nice start for me. And again, they give you all of the associated code for it. All right. And you can go in and change it any way you want. That's what I think is nice about this. So I started looking at this over the weekend, and I said, okay, so again, what do we have? Well, your home page, I was thinking we'd make basically 6 pages on our site. We'd have a home page. Now, so I started looking through this, and I thought, this is pretty good. So we could have a cover page. Now, that's not good. That's not what you'd want. So what I did was I went out and I said, okay, this would be where maybe you would have your own picture, and it wouldn't be like, you wouldn't want to take the screen up here. I wouldn't want my face on a screen like this. So in other words, you know, that's my granddaughter being goofy. I wouldn't want that to be me on mine, because that would turn a lot more people off than it would on. I'd be afraid of the people that it would turn on. All right. But when you start to take a look at what's in here, though, I thought, okay, so I went out and I said, let's go to Unsplash.com. And I put in here, man walking on beach at sunset. Well, that was the first time in a while that's happened. All right. And just looking at it, I thought, well, that one looked pretty cool. That one wasn't bad. That might be the kind of thing you want on there. So all you'd have to do then would be to go back and replace, you know, what we just looked at. Well, wherever there. That with a picture. Okay? Okay. And I mean, do you want, when you're doing this, do you want, if let's say that you're going to do that, so you're going to put a picture on here. Do you want text and a button on there? I don't know. But at a minimum, you know, again, that says cover, so you could change that to whatever you wanted, but yours would probably be like home, portfolio, resume, etc. And you should set yours up in a way that you think best describes you and that looks good and that looks professional. All right? So what I thought we would do, we might do it, it might take, I don't think we'll do it in one period, but we might do it in 2 periods, is I'm going to walk you through the process of doing this. And when we do, I'm going to, basically, I'm going to give you some images and stuff. You can change them, but just as we start doing this, so that everyone's pretty much would look the same. All right? And it would give you a start. All right? One thing, just so you know, now a couple of you in here, you know who you are. A couple of you in here have already, you know, gotten ahead on your homework, and you've done 10 and you've done 11. Okay? I did not grade those. But what I did last night was I went out and I went through everything that I could find. All right? Keep giving me invites like you've been doing. You know, just do it whenever you add new stuff. I don't know why, but for some reason, but some of the stuff in there, for some people, there was little to nothing in your homework or in your labs. So your grades have been updated, just so you know. All right? And by tomorrow, hopefully, by tomorrow morning when you come in here, so will your tests. All right? We will take some time and go over both of those tests. Not today, but we will. So like I said, then the rest of the period then is yours. I thought this would take somewhere around an hour. But I didn't want to go any further than this today. Okay? But again, I did want to show you this, okay? And I know I mentioned it to you before, but I'm going to go out there. And I have nothing to do with this site. I mean, I don't want people to think, oh, does he get money for it? No. It's just something that I found when I was out Googling stuff. And again, I will send you this by the end of the period. But It's mdbootstrap.com/education/bootstrap. They have a tutorial. Then underneath that, notice 4 sites: a corporate website, a landing page, an admin dashboard, and a portfolio. Here's their portfolio. So again, you might look at it and say, I never want anything like that. But they've got, and they're also spas, just so you know, they're single page apps, so you'd have to break yours up. All right, but all the code is right here. Now I don't believe they provide for you the images. I could be wrong. All right, but I don't think they do. All right. So when you come in here then tomorrow, we're going to start creating this. We'll either do the test first and then work on this for about an hour, or vice versa. It doesn't really matter. All right. Questions on anything we went over? So if you get a chance by tomorrow morning, go out to Get Bootstrap and just take a look at what's out there, because we're going to start from a clean slate with nothing at all in it. All right. There are no questions then. The rest of the period is yours. Again, remember, a week from Friday, which is the 16th, then all of your homework for 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 is due. Now, if you disagree, when you look through your stuff, if you go, hey, I didn't get any credit for Chapter 7, I did that, all right, then send me an email and let me know that, okay? But like I said, you should be able to look through your stuff right now and see it. To be honest with you, I don't spend a lot of time. I look through your content, okay? And it looks, yeah, that's pretty much what they asked you to do. Okay. All right. That's all that I have there.